Hello, for my project I used the Settlers of Catan game. This is an example of the board. You can see there's various types like brick, wood, ore, wheat, and a special one called desert. All these pieces are laid randomly on the board. On top of that, there is a little tile, like I referred to, a round tile, that has three pieces of information. I called it name, which is the letter, a dice, which is the number, and then I call it priority, which is the likelihood it would show up. These little dots represent 1 to 5, which is how likely it would be to show up. Those tiles are all laid in a specific order. That's what the letter is representing, A, B, C, D. And they do not land on the desert. So the order defines that while they have to be in a specific order, they have to skip the desert. So for that reason, for my project, I used the builder pattern. And the builder pattern allows, here's some information from Wikipedia. It allows for an algorithm which is for creating a complex object which should be independent from the object. So this allowed me to set up a piece and use all the various classes to create the actual piece, which had all four pieces of information: the type, the name, the dice, and the priority. And then it didn't require it to have any information, the actual piece, to know how it was created. Just once it was created, it had its information. And I've provided some of this information already, but basically because of the fact that the pieces are laid randomly, the information's added afterwards, and it has to skip desert. It was a good candidate, and since it's only done at the setup, a creation pattern was good, and the builder pattern is a creation pattern. Here's a class diagram. You can see that the piece type is over on the right, and has more things going on, because it has to actually put all the pieces down. Then it has to run a shuffle because the pieces will be separate. The other ones are a little more standard, so priority, name, and dice. Those all represent the information that was on the actual tile that sat on the piece. And that then has a common interface, which is defining the information that contains. The piece then is an aggregation of all four of those. So from the gang of four, you can see a bit here. So the constructor is actually the board, which I have a little bit of a code, but the board class actually does the construction part. Our build part A, build part B, build part C represent the name, piece, and priority that I did in my implementation. Here's some more information. This is also in the write-up in the Word document that I have about this particular case. Here's a little bit of a code. I have some code for the rest of this. So the builder interface, it basically is defining this thing called add value, and it's taking the desert. And the desert is very important because that is where we have to skip the desert. So I have to know that, and then it kind of defines how the order is going to go. For this reason, I have an algorithm that basically is going to go through and it's actually going to run a counter, because the counter then has to keep track, so it knows the next thing it has to do, and it has to know where the desert is, and it has to know if I find the desert, I skip. And so we have an algorithm. The algorithm is very similar for all those three pieces. And then here's the board. So the board then, after it's going to execute all three of those, the piece name, or the piece name, the piece die, and the piece priority. It's going to run, and then it gets all that information, and then it runs through a for loop, and the for loop basically then is assigning, because now in the piece name, the piece dice, and the piece priority, I created an array with the information about the names, about the dice, and priority in a specific order, skipping desert, and now basically it has to assign all those values to an actual piece. So once this is done, then the piece is created and it has all the information, and the game can continue as it wants. And so for that reason, I found the builder to be a great pattern. I also in this project use singleton and observer, but those are kind of beyond this presentation.